been a while. I've been doing some other stuff with some of the other developers, working with like 3 people at the moment on some other stuff with their Atavism projects. Um, so today we're actually going to set up the VPS. Now, I am using Ionos just because their stuff was on sale, and I'll pull them up real quick, see if they've still got the sale going. But I'm basically paying like $2 a month for 6 months on a pretty beefy VPS. I think we've got either 16 or 18 gig of RAM for $2 a month. So yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm looking around here, seeing if it's currently on sale still. No, looks like their sale ended, but still not too bad of a price when you look at it. But this is the server we're on. Is the we're kind of down here on this one. Price went up to 65, but it was like 25. But basically we are on a RAM system, which means our system has more memory than a regular VPS. But we've been using Ionos for most of our servers ever since I've been in IT and everything else, mostly because they have a dual firewall system, which is extremely helpful on a lot of components, and they're very easy to link multiple servers together. They're generally extremely cheap, and I've probably been with them for 10 years, and I haven't had any of my servers yet blow up on me. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good system if your stuff doesn't explode. So if I hop into my account here real quick, you can actually look at my server stats. Now, I did a complete delete, and right now this is a fresh Ubuntu install. There's no server stuff installed. Atavism's not on there. Nothing's currently there. It's a nice clean install. We're going to walk through the entire process of getting a VPS up and running. So if we hop into here, so we're on the RAM XL version, and we're using, I think, Ubuntu 22. Yeah, Ubuntu 22.04. And this is a clean install. You can see I reinstalled it earlier today, and I haven't even logged in since I did anything. And we got 18 gig of RAM, 6-core processor, and we got it while it was on sale for $2 a month, and it's going to go up either $25 or $35. I think my contract's for $25 after the 6 months, but hopefully we'll have our stuff switched over by then and kind of go from there. It's a pretty nice little system, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing set up to run with Atavism. So this is a Ubuntu, so it is Linux. The reason I always use Linux servers is they're cheaper. So if I come in here, and I'm not going to because I can't afford it, but if, for example, I wanted to do a Windows server, it'll cost me an extra $60 per month. I really don't want to pay $60 for something I can get for free. And I did play with the Windows server, and oh my lord, is it horrid. This 18 gig of RAM, we were left with 3 gigs. It used every drop of it that it can get, just like Windows usually does. So I always stick with the Ubuntus. They're really, really light on the resources. If you know what you're doing, you can mess around with some of the others. But Linux is really not that bad. It's stable. And while it's annoying because you got to do everything by hand with basically commands, once you set it, you basically never have to touch it again unless you're changing like your securities or that sort of stuff. With Atavism, you'll be doing all your backups and everything remotely through the standalone editor. So you really just set it up and you never come back to it. I've had several servers that have basically run for like 4 years, and I forgot they were even running. And yeah, fun stuff. I've never had any problems out of those. So to get into our server, we have to go to a command prompt. This doesn't have to be secured or an administrative account, but I am going to basically pop in here, and we're going to hop in. So you normally will use a system called PuTTY. but I try not to give people download links and all that stuff, especially since there's a lot of bad links for PuTTY, and you don't want to go downloading a cracked version of something and then you end up infecting your computer with all kinds of weird stuff. So I just use the SSH because, again, once you set it up, you basically never have to come back to it. So I really don't care too much for the keys and all that stuff. But speaking of keys, I do have to delete my key because I did just reinstall the system, so my old key's not going to work. Give me just a second to delete that while I'm thinking about it. Alright. So to get into our server, it's not like a web server where you have a cPanel and all that fun stuff. So you have to do it by hand. We're going to run an SSH command, -L for login. We're logging in as root, and then the IP address. It will then ask you, do you want to accept the certificate? Yes. And then it wants your password. And we are now in the main brain of a Linux server. Now the beauty of Linux, as I was saying before, where we tried the Windows server on this particular VPS package, this has an 18 gig of RAM system and it only levels like 2.5, 3 gig of RAM. If I look at my memory usage here, I started with, up here at the top, just about 18 gigs, and I still have 16 gigs free. That's why I like Linux. It uses almost no memory for almost anything. Most of the memory that's currently being used is because I'm logged in on a terminal, which basically takes up a bit of oomph. But other than that, you can see most of the stuff that's running is using almost no memory whatsoever. Very few things pop up that's actually using any memory. That's why a lot of servers run on Linux. It's a lot more resource friendly. But we can get out of there. And now to get ourselves ready for Atavism. There's only a few things we actually have to do for Atavism to run. We need Java, because that's what Atavism is coded in, and then we also need the MySQL system. Now on top of that, we also need to open up the firewalls. Now on IONOS, it is a dual firewall, so you have the internal, like you do on your home computer, you unlock certain things inside your computer. And then you also have a like a router that you also have to open up to the world. With IONOS, you have to do the same thing. You have a router firewall, and then you have the server firewall itself. And for that, usually you only have to do the one, so I'm not going to show you how to edit the IONOS firewall server, but they got really good documentations on how to do that. But because it's always something I forget to do, it's going to be the first thing that I do. So on the firewalls, it's a simple UFW command. I call it the universal firewall because I think everybody in the world should be using it, and people like Microsoft should, use it. Stop making things so difficult. We're doing the ports 5040 through 5060. And can't do that. It's a TCP protocol. Allow. What was the system here? Let me find the commands for this version. I was just working on a CentOS system, and my commands, I'm confused. Firewall. So generally these are very, very, very straightforward, and it's extremely basic codes. So yeah. So basically, I forgot the slash. That's what it was. So you just add in a slash here for TCP, and then another one for UDP. These are the two internet protocols, TCP, UDP. Different things use them for different things. TCP is a slower connection. It has a higher header, but it's guaranteed delivery. UDP is what most of the servers are going to rely on for basic information that is redundant and constantly changing, such as chat messages, positions, and all that stuff. Since it's constantly changing, it needs to be fast. So yeah, Atavism uses both sets of them. So for each one of these, we're just going to go through and add those in. So our next set is 5566. And again, we're going to do that for both sets. And then the last set for Atavism itself is 9005 through 9010. And then we have one more to add, and that's going to be for our database server, which by default is 3306. And then that's done. And then we're not going to enable it because we're going to reboot the system when we're done. Well, I mean, I guess we could just reboot it now and do that. But basically, once you've gone through and added in all of the commands, you're basically just going to type in a UFW status verbose. That means show it to the screen. And it shows it's currently inactive. And so all you've got to do is now basically turn it on, and it will take all these permissions that you've just assigned and make it the new firewall rules, and that's all there is to it for the Linux. And this will basically start up for you every time you basically start it up. But just be sure, we're going to go into sudo, which is for a super user. We're going to do a UFW enable. And we'll tell us it might disconnect things, but we didn't mess with the SSH, so we're not worried about, so just yes. And now the firewall is active, and if we look at it, it'll tell us all the connections that are now allowed into the system. These are the only ports that are allowed to talk to the computer. Everything else is closed. So now if we look, it's a nice empty system. There's a few commands we need to basically run to get everything set up for Atavism. First off, we're going to put in Java. Now Java, we need the JDK 8. We can't go higher than that just because Atavism is still using some of the older Java code. So I just put that in. We're doing a sudo apt install open JDK-8-JRE-headless, which basically the headless means we don't need a UI or anything else. It takes up less memory. We're going to run that. Well, that's just, are we sure? It's going to take up a whole 110 megs. Yes, I'm sure we can afford it. Now, I am not going to use the newest version of MySQL, and the main reason is Unity. Not Atavism, but MySQL put out their latest version. I believe it's 8.0.31, and Unity absolutely despises this new version, something fierce. I think every dev at Unity grabbed their pitchforks and torches and stood out MySQL's facilities and just try to burn the place down because, man, does it hate it something fierce. I've downloaded every connector off of the MySQL's database, and zero works with the Unities that I'm working with because they have such a modified .NET subsystem that basically it just doesn't work with anything but the absolute ancient versions of it. So for that, we're going to be installing MySQL 5.7. This is old enough that everything's happy with it, everything uses it, and Unity especially doesn't make me need to download 400,000 connectors and try to poke at each one until Unity wants to play nice with something. So for doing that, we need to go to the MySQL. Never download these from anybody but the developers. So in this case, it's a MySQL server. We're downloading it from the repo on MySQL, and we're grabbing our configuring program. Now this configurator program allows you to choose which version you want to run. If we basically were to look at it as is, then it's basically just going to say, hey, the latest version is version 8. We're going to install the latest version, which we don't want. We want to tell it which version we do want. So we just download it, and then we're just going to run it with a sudo dpackage -i and then the name of the package. That'll put us into here, and we want to run the Bionic. This is basically which repositories and servers we want to use for it. Bionic is usually the most compatible with everything, so I usually use it. By default, it's wanting to do MySQL 8. We just go to the first option that's highlighted, hit enter, take it to 5.7, done, go to OK, done, brings back the good old DOS. I remember those things, I loved it, I love my DOS, why did it have to go away? And then we just need to run apt-get update to update our program list. Now this is going to complain usually that the keys don't match, which is this error right here, because we're basically told not to download off the Ubuntu system and we want to download it off of the Bionic system from MySQL. It's not a public key, so we need to add that key in, which is the command apt-key adv keyserver.ubuntu.com. Oops, wrong one. Get out of this. And it's -- receive keys to basically authorize those keys, and we just put in that public key that it says isn't in the list. And this will basically authenticate using the encryption codes with Linux to make sure that any communications match these keys so that nobody's injecting packets and you're not getting all kinds of hacked into programs and everything, and they're coming from the respectful people. So we just wait for it to go through, tell you that it processed it, imported a new key, and we need to run the update again, make sure it all goes in nice and happy. And then it'll tell us all the stuff is now ready. And now if we tell it to do a install, it will install version 5.7. And in this case it is not doing the 5.7. It's still going to 8. It says it right there. So we're going to cancel this. And we're going to run that configuration program again. 5.7. Okay. And now what do you want to install? And you're still trying to do the 8.0. Give me a second here. Let me find that command to get the cache list. The core, no, not the Quarry cache. Install cache. Oops, now that. Run this. I cannot access it because it's the wrong code. ls. We've got 0.8.10-1 all. Why are you saying that's not the right file? Alright, we'll just copy it. How about that? Long day, I can't read. Okay, no you, for you, for you. Preview packages, try that. For you. Did not complain about the keys, okay. Now do you want to do the right update here? My biggest problem is I don't want to fight with Unity trying to get the right connectors going with the newest version of 8 here. And it looks like it's going to make me deal with it anyway. But, alright, give me just a second here. I want to find... I mean, there's definitely a way to force it here. I want 7. Go. You're not giving me any errors whatsoever, so why are you trying to force it? Is it got a error with it here? Give me the policy. I mean, it shows 5.7's there. So, I mean, it's ready to go. I'll just force it to install the one I want. How about that? So, we're just going to do a manual install, which is sudo apt install -f, and then the actual name and version. We see 5.7 here. So the command is basically going to be a 5.7 star. So it'll fill in a 0.40 for everything. And we're basically going to install the MySQL client, the community server, and the server itself. Tells it wants to use up some memory or some storage, 327 megs. Yes. It's going to install everything we want. Just put in a temporary password. Now, just because you set that password does not mean that MySQL is done. Please do not use MySQL without fully setting it up. That's basically just to get it running in the background so you can actually configure it. Once MySQL is in, you need to run a command called MySQL secured installation. This is going to go through and secure the system. It's going to delete all the extra, like the test users, the test databases. It's going to prevent root from having any remote access. Definitely something you want to do on a server that you're going to be putting public for, like Atavism. You don't want anybody trying to log on as root. So, yeah, definitely an important thing. Run the secured installation. It's going to ask you for the password that you just put in. It'll ask you, do you want to validate the passwords? Doesn't really matter. Do you want to change the password? Yes. And now actually put in a real password. Oops. I'll ask you, do you want to remove the anonymous users? Yes. Do you want to disallow root from logging in remotely? Most definitely. And do you want to remove the test database from it? Of course. And do you want to reload all the privileges and set all these into your new happy server? Well, that's why I'm doing it. So yes. And now your MySQL server is set up and ready to go, and yay, fun stuff. So now we can go ahead and log into our MySQL system. And we are now in, happy. Everything should be fun and glorious and happy to go. If we run a command, though, I'm going to show you one problem you're going to run into with Linux. If you run this, we see that the default connection is 151. Now, if I go into the Atavism manager on the Windows server, and if I find the stuff for it here, this is basically the default for Atavism on Windows. It has 2,000 connections. That's a little bit different than 151. And this is going to give us problems. And this is probably one of the biggest problems that I see people running into when they're trying to use a Linux server for the first time and they don't understand this. Linux is designed to streamline. It's not intended for just give me everything you have and I'll make do with it. It wants to go minimalistic on everything to save on all the resources. So if we install Atavism now, it's going to crash. because there's not enough connections here to run an actual full-blown server. When you first install a system like this on Linux, it acts like it's a development machine, not a production machine. Get back in here. But if we look at our commands, we're not using next to no memory running this miniature system. We're only down to 15.8 gigabytes of RAM versus the 18 we started with. We're not using much at all for the MySQL system. Now, once we upgrade those users, or the number of connections it can handle, it is going to increase our memory usage, and this is why Linux, so you can see it right there, went away really quick, but we're not using that much memory. We're using like, 20, 30 megabytes of storage, so yeah. We're not using a gargantuan ton of memory on it in its current state. Atavism is going to take up most of the memory, but MySQL doesn't. Don't go overboard and just say, well, give me 200,000 connections to it, because it's just going to subject you to packet injectors and packet sniffers and everybody else who's trying to break into your server. It just gives them more connections to try to do it in. Generally, I'll add about 200 to my license. So with a general license with Atavism, you have 1,000 users. I'll start it off at like 1,200 users for the max connection. As I get closer to my full user base, I'll add more to it. But until then, there's no point in having a bunch of systems just there for no reason whatsoever. Now, we do need to put in the files for Atavism. Which is relatively straightforward here. We're just basically logging into our server, if that's the right server. I've got so many servers I'm bouncing around to here. And apparently that is not the server. Let me pull the servers. I'm not giving out my connection info. For you, root, and the password. Now we could also use the wget, which I might, because I got so much stuff running in the background. I actually don't think I have enough database to actually connect to anything. Waiting to retry, port 22. Come on, Windows, stop stealing all my resources. What are you even at right now? I never understood Windows. I have 32 gig of RAM and I'm not running really anything, and Windows is using 96 gigabytes of swap space and 31.3 gigs of system memory and 40% of my GPU with absolutely nothing running. Now I know what is this, an RTX 3060 doesn't need this much processing power to stream one video. I hate Windows, and this is why I'm always running everything under the sun on something that actually works. So, pop back in here, try our connections. If not, we'll probably just pop into the A panel. A panel, downloads, give us that server. See if we can do a wget from here. Well, first let's get into the right folder. I usually put it in the OPT directory. And there it goes. This is downloading the server. You can get that link that I'm downloading from your A panel. You just go in there and basically tell it which package you want to download. And here we're using the X6, so you just right click on the download, copy the link, And then the command to download is wget, which is basically webgit, get this file off the internet. And you can see it's all downloaded there. And do a little search, and of course it downloaded the file, but it didn't name it right. Go figure. Let's just remove it. Yoink. Alright, let me try to get these things to actually work, if Windows would actually cooperate with me for a change. For you, quick connect, pop in. Might not like the fact that I've reset all my keys here. Yes, delete all the keys. So basically, what we're trying to do is to upload the Atavism server to our new server. And I do not know why you're not wanting to connect at all here. You're literally sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Connection timed out after 20 seconds of inactivity. It might be I played with my firewall. UFW allow 22. Oops. First, we need sudo for that. And then re-enable it. Yes. There it goes. Now it sees our key. I forgot to add it to the firewall. I always forget the firewall stuff. So now that we're in our server, if I find my stuff here, I got files all over the place. Desktops, we want... No, I want desktop, Atavism, and I want our server. Where's the server? There's the server. So we're just going to go into the OPT. The reason I usually use OPT is because there's nothing here, so it's the easiest for me to find later. So much easier to find things and there's nothing else for you to compete with. And we'll upload that file, and that's the only thing we have to upload to the server to get Atavism set up. The biggest thing is that in Windows you have the Atavism manager that basically goes through and sets things up for you, which is like setting up your database and all that sort of stuff. We got to do that by hand, and we got to create the users and all that sort of fun stuff. But yeah, it is what it is. It's just a couple of generic commands and pretty easy. Now, while I am going to be showing some of the commands in here, do keep in mind that this is a temp server and it will be wiped, so none of the passwords that you're seeing, you're going to actually get to see. They will be deleted. For the most part, this whole server is going to get deleted with a new IP. Now, this is just to show you how things go, so don't get any happy ideas over there while this thing's going. While we're waiting on that, is the PHP INI and the PHP for Apache. Now 30 seconds left for this happy little update. Now, while it's doing its thing, it's almost done now, but we do need sudo apt get install unzip. It's just unzip and then the name of the file. We'll put it into the Atavism server. If we now hop into the Atavism server, and it looks just like the server that you get on the standalone edit or manager in Windows, because it's literally the exact same thing that it copies over. So all the files are in the same place. Everything here is the exact same as what you would get in here. So this is my Atavism manager on the Windows side. Its server files, all the stuff matches here. It's just going sideways instead of up and down. But we have all the same folders and everything. Everything's in the same place. So pretty easy to find your way around there. Now we need to set up the MySQL stuff. So we have to import the database. So first we want to go to our SQL. And this is done for you in Windows, but like my previous videos on showing you how to go into core, the default is to always install with the demo, but we're doing the core install, so we need to make sure that we are getting the core databases installed, and it's these 4 systems here it needs done. Now with MySQL, we can import these databases from the command prompt here, or terminal, and it's not hard, just pay attention to the arrow. So we have 2 arrows here. Look at how this looks on the video. Kind of hard to see. But this arrow is pointing to the directory here. So this is basically saying put this into the system. The other arrow goes the opposite direction, and that means take the data out of the system. This is important to understand because if you're trying to import a database, which is what we have to do with these 4, your arrow has to point to the left. If you're doing a backup, such as with MySQL dump, and you're backing up the database to a dump, you're putting the database from the system into a file. So it's either coming out of the file or it's going into a file, and it all depends on where that arrow is pointing. So the simple command for importing a database is mysql -u root -p. Never type your password on the console. -p and then no password will ask you for the password before it imports. Arrow pointing into the system from the file name. We're going to start with admin SQL. Hit enter, type in your happy password, and that database is now in the system. We do the same for the others. Atavism, and then we have our master. And then we have our world content. Now with this, we are technically ready to go. The only thing we have to do is add in an actual user to use it and configure the server. So if we want to add in a user, we have to actually get into the MySQL system. So we can basically just run this without the end command for an import. Now we're in the MySQL system itself. And from here we can basically add in all our happy little commands and do all of our stuff. So what we want to do is to create a user. And I already got it mostly saved up here. Create user Atavism at localhost identified with the MySQL native password. Since we're using an old version of MySQL, the 5.7, we do not need the MySQL native password, and technically because we're using such an old system, it's already using the native password basically, so nothing's going to complain about it. But since all the guides tell you to, I don't want to give you a different command and confuse you. It's basically just representing how the password is going to be stored inside of the database. So if your database is breached, how hard is it to steal all your passwords? Well, you, needless to say, don't want that to be very hard, but you kind of want to protect your stuff. But in this case, we're just making it easy anyway. And at the end of each command, you add a colon. We're going to add the exact same user. Only we're going to take out the local host. Oops, wrong button. Take out the local host and we're going to replace it with a %sign. A %sign means global. It can come in from any IP whatsoever. I'm doing this because this is a test system, so there's going to be multiple connections coming into it from, for example, we're going to be using the remote authentication systems. We're going to have our web servers coming in, and then we're going to have our dev system connecting into it. So we're going to open up this to everybody. This is not a smart idea at all in any way, shape, or form. Please do not do this. This is just easier for a tutorial. Instead of using the %sign, you should put in the actual IP numbers of the systems you want to have permission to access the system. If, for example, I type in some random IP here, doesn't matter if Atavism has the right password or not, if it's not coming from this IP, it will not accept that connection regardless. That's how you want it. If somebody compromises your system and steals your passwords to your main users, you don't want them logging in from anywhere. So do be mindful of that. But the little %sign basically means just listen to it from anybody who has a password. We're going to use the same password for both of them. Now we need to grant permission to the system, and if we show databases, we can see all the stuff including the admin, Atavism, master, and the world content that we just imported. Now, normally you do not grant all permissions. You grant permissions on the systems that you want. In this case, because I'm going to be deleting the Atavism user after everything is set up, I'm just going to give it global permissions, which is basically simple grant all on ****, meaning every database, every table that exists, give this permission to Atavism at localhost. And where did I mess that up? I forgot the 2. Cannot find any matching row in the user table. I just put them in there. What are you talking about? Create user Atavism. What did I not do with my privileges? Why are you saying they don't exist? Use MySQL. Select user. The user or users? I don't remember. User from users. Yeah. Yeah, wrong one. Select user from users. Table users does not exist, so that's a regular. Okay, so I do see my 2 Atavisms in there, and you're saying that the user doesn't exist. Nice. Alright. Grant all on ****to Atavism. To Atavism. They are spelled the same. Oh no, they're not, because I misspelt localhost. Whoops. So we need to drop that user. drop user, and everybody's probably looking at me like I'm a complete idiot, and I pretty much am. And operation failed to drop because I screwed it up, but yay. Okay, well, I'll fix that later. I need to add that user. Oh wait, did I add him? Grant them all, grant them all. Create user. Yeah, I spelt it right up there. I just spelt it wrong on there. So the user exists. I just can't spell for the life of me. So we want to go back into here and actually spell this right. Local host. There we go. And then we're going to do the same for remote access. We're going to flush the privileges, not slush. And now all those users have access to it. And to test that, we are, not that one, I want Atavism Manager, or the editor. We are going to come under our project here. And all our stuff should be set up. Test it, see if it can connect. 46, is that the right IP? Yeah, 46. 66, 46. Admin, Atavism, 3306 does not like that connection for some reason. Now let's fire up. Actually, let's just reboot the system. I might mess something else up there when all the stuff's in. Oops. Exit, error, exit. We'll do a reboot just to make sure. That'll kick me off the server. It's going to restart the server. And get my stuff ready again. Oh, I remember what I didn't do. I didn't open MySQL itself up to the outside world. Whoops. I guess that would be an important thing to deal with. Is that under etc MySQL? Nano myCNF. And that's not the right one. Nope. Alright, let me figure out where Ubuntu puts that one. Way too many folders and everything to remember, so whenever in doubt, Google. It is under the MySQL CNF, not that my one. So config.d nano MySQL CNF, and that's not the right file. Nope, I'm in the wrong config. cd MySQL config. Come on, get out. MySQLD. There we go, that's my file. And in here we're just going to basically replace the bind address to all zeros. This will allow it to listen to everybody. Save it. System control. Restart MySQL. And now we should be able to connect. Yep. So over here in the editor, we can hit the test, get our connection into it, populate it, save it, pop in there, and all the demo data is, or not the demo data because we did the core install, but all that stuff is in there ready to go, and we just need to do our stuff. So none of the stuff's in there, we just gotta update the database. So we are set up, we can now connect. Now let's crash the server. Literally it's going to crash, and it's going to crash because of the reason I told you before. So Atavism into the bin, and if we, well, first we got to set up the file. So we want to nano auth properties. These are all set. I need to do the world. And now these are all set because basically that should be the exact same for Atavism. Yep. So I'm going to put this into another window to put in my key because nobody needs to see my keys. And it's basically the same setup on the regular systems here. Pop that up here. Alright, so now our server should be configured. Our licenses put in. Now all we need to do is fire up the servers. And they are set to X, but just to make sure, we're gonna do it anyway. And if you come in here and do a ls, which is a list command, and these are all white, that means they're not executable, you can't run them. If that's the case, you just run a chmod, and you basically just add a +X and then the name of the file. In this case it's not going to do anything because it's already green, which means you can execute it. The execution commands are the name of the file, which is auth.sh, not a comma, sh dash lowercase v capital C start. And then we're going to put a colon, and we're going to do the same thing for the world server. And once this gets going, it's going to crash and burn because MySQL doesn't have enough connections to run a full-fledged server. So I'm going to get ready to kill it. And as soon as it basically bottlenecks all of the servers, it's basically going to keep trying to connect, and eventually it's going to run out of available connections to try to use, and we'll just give up trying. So we just wait for it, and it's going to give up and start throwing out a bunch of errors. And there goes the error. So I just run the stop commands, stop them all, and then once it's done I'll show you how to tell if this is your problem or not. So if you come to the first error, it tells you I can't connect to the database, I've tried 3 times, I gave up. Well, we know that the password is the same, and we know that the password works because we just connected to it. So we know that that's correct. But if we come down to the next error, too many connections. The data source was rejected, refused to give us any more connections, and the server said there's too many current connections. Well, there's your problem. Too many connections. So if you remember inside of our MySQL, which we could just fire up again, now if we remember, I think it was what, 150 or whatever that it actually had. No, 151. Now we have 1,000 user license, and we're only going to be able to allow 151 connections. That's not 151 users, that's 151 connections. And if you look at this, these are all the servers. Those are each using connections on their own, and most of them will run many connections at the same time because they're pulling all the data back and forth from the server. You're going to have a lot of connections running on a full-fledged server. Now remember, inside of Windows the default is 2000. We really don't need it that big. We're going to set it to 1200. So you want to edit the mysql.cnf file. Oops, I'm in the wrong system. I'm trying to edit from inside of MySQL. That doesn't work. Let's try it outside of MySQL. Nano MySQL config.d MySQL CNF. Now on the bottom of this, I don't know why it starts with a MySQL. That's not the right one. You want to change it to a D at the end, because this is the server is the one with the D. The MySQL is for the client. We don't want to edit the client's configuration. We want to tell the server what it can do, so we add a D to the end of it. And then we just add a max connections equals 1200. Restart the MySQL server. Log back in, make sure that it's up and running. We're in, and now if we try to run that list again, now we're up to 1200. Now we actually have some connections to play with, and we can actually consider this a server. We can actually handle some connections. Now if we try to run our server, we're going to have a very interesting surprise. It's actually going to work. So we just sit here and wait for it. Now keep in mind the first launch is always going to take a while because it's setting everything up, and yeah, it's Java. But generally it doesn't take too long, and you'll get your little notice that says that the server is up and running and it's ready to play and have all kinds of fun in the world, and yay. So we just wait for it. And there we go. Our server is now up and running, ready to go. Everybody's happy. No more complaining there's not enough connections. No more complaining that I can't connect to the database. You can spend a lot of time, because if you go through the Atavism's wiki on setting up these servers for a custom server in Linux, it doesn't tell you about the thread limits on the number of connections. So if we pop in here, server install custom, if we scroll through here, you'll see nothing in here about editing the number of connections that it has. And it's because they're basically developing everything around Windows, and the default in Windows that they've set is basically 2000. It's not the same on everybody else. So you can see running through the exact Ubuntu server commands here. Nowhere in here is it telling us to change the numbers of stuff. And it is what it is. But if you're ever running into those problems where you just cannot get the server to start up, check your connections, add some to it, and you should be good to go. Usually that's the problem. So the Unity wiki basically gives you a pretty basic summary on how to set everything up. It just misses the one step on it, telling you to basically update your number of max connections, and all that stuff is in there, ready to go. Gives you how to set up your projects and all that sort of stuff, but we're not going to do that yet because we have another little interesting thing we're going to be doing. And that is setting up our actual remote authentication. Now, remote authentication if you've been following through the series, we set up a generic one before. That was a fake one. It didn't actually use real registered information or anything. The next tutorial, we're actually going to be installing a CMS system for remote authentication. And if I can get around to getting some other stuff done, we'll also be setting up a store. And let me just hop in there and I will show you what we will be setting up. This one. Okay, so if I come into, no, I don't want Atavism. So this is HN Gamers. Now, they make quite a few things, and I would definitely recommend you check them out, look at all their stuff. You can see their little packages for it. He's got little guides on the walkthrough, which also, I think he's working on a new version that tells you about the users and all that sort of stuff. But he's got these little systems here that are like add-ons to it. And one of the ones that he has is for the remote authentication. And it is basically two systems you've got to put into your little server here. If we look through it here, the Atavism WordPress CMS. This is what we're basically going to be installing on a WordPress system. This will allow you to, in a sense, not use the Atavism login system. They will log in through your website using your website's username password. This will give you access to the password recovery systems and all that sort of fun stuff. And it's not the best of systems, but it works, and his integration on it is pathetically easy. And by pathetically easy, I mean it is easy. Setting up most of these servers and add-ons and stuff is a royal pain in the Rumpelstiltskin. This is taken care of by a guy on Discord. He's in the Atavism Discord. His name is Facade, and he is a really good guy. I've been working with a system that we've been having some problems with getting things in their system, and he has been remarkably helpful walking through step by step on everything with it. And he's got a store that, in a sense, as is, you can use their system to run your authentication. You can run it through subscriptions so that only people with a paid subscription are able to connect to your system. You can also run multiple servers with it. I think his default set up for up to 10 servers, and you can set up different rules for each one of those servers. This is the guy that you're going to be basically looking for in there, the Facade. And he's a really, really good guy. He's really knowledgeable. He's really good with WordPress. I am not good with WordPress. I think I've made 2 pages in WordPress in my entire life, and one of them was with his. So that says my knowledge with WordPress. So yeah, fun stuff. But it's extremely easy to put his stuff in. And if you come into your WordPress admin under your plugins, those are the 2 systems that you're going to have. You're going to install the Atavism core and then the Atavism user verification. These are in turn right in the system. So if you just go to add new and you look for them, we're going to search for Atavism. There's his systems right there. You'll just install both of these. You have to start with core, and then you can use the authentication system. And then you'll have little HN Gamers in the bottom here. Go into the database, and you basically just set this up to point to your database, and you can see we've installed our database. It's connected to the database, so all of our credentials here are right, and that's literally all you got to do to set up the core. You can come in here, the CAPTCHAs are not required to run the system, but if you want some of the added on features that he's going to be putting in later, you will need a CAPTCHA from Google. You can have up to 10 servers. Each one you can give it a name, and it's basically the same as setting it up inside of the standalone manager. What's the IP, what's the port, what's the database, username, password, same as setting it up inside the editor all 4 times. That's all you gotta do. For the user verify, you basically just gotta come in here. Is this only for subscribers? No, that means anybody, subscribers or not, are allowed to use your system. Is your login going to be username based, or is it going to be email based? In our case, we're just going to go with a normal login. So that's set to no. And then the Paid Membership Pro is an add-on that you can get. It's also free on WordPress, where you can basically add monthly subscription plans. So you can have, like RuneScape has 2 types of servers. They have their free servers and they have their paid servers. You can come here and create 2 servers for the same game and say, well, only some people are allowed to use the paid server if they're at this tier on their membership. And the next part is the comma separated server list. This is who this is going to listen to. This is one of the things that honestly I didn't think about when I built my own CMS systems and everything else, and this is really a smart thing that he did. It's only going to listen to these IPs. That's extremely important. So if you're trying to run this system and you're not getting any results out of it, it might be because your IP is not listed to listen to you. This should only, once you have it all set up and you're happy with it and it's working your way and everything works, the only system that it should be talking to is your game server. That's the only IP number that should be in there. If I'm trying to hack into your system and I want to guess passwords or user IDs or anything else, it's only going to listen to the IPs you tell it to. So in this case, it's basically saying these are the IPs you're allowed to listen to. If you're not one of these 3, I'm not going to pay attention to you. I'm not going to tell you user ID or anything else. And it's very, very, very simple. Setting up the pages is extremely easy. You just create a new page. I call mine Verify. You'll come over onto the side to the template, and you're just going to set that to the Atavism Verify user. And that's it. Don't put nothing else in here. And if you have like toolbars and everything else, go through and just make sure that they're all turned off. So there shouldn't be any extra components running on your website. You shouldn't be showing images in the post. You shouldn't be having like little banners and everything going on across this. This should only return a number. Nothing else should be shown. Anything more than that will confuse Atavism. So when you get this installed and you're testing it, you'll basically just go to this page and it will, in a sense, put on the screen just a number. It's either going to be an error or something, and I really can't show you because I knew it would have passwords to my stuff. But in turn, that's all that you need to do with it. You'll test it, get it up and running, and once it shows the user ID, that's what it's going to let the people log into. Setting that up will be our next video, and I'm going to make up a couple of basically bogus users that I'm just going to delete afterwards, so then I won't really worry about the passwords being breached. But actually, I guess we could kind of do that now since it's already open. If I can remember where I'm at. So if we hop back in there, I'm just going to add in a fake user here. And yoink. Okay, so we basically just created our little fake user here. And now if we basically pop it in, So in this case, this is how Atavism is going to call it. It's going to go to your website. It's going to ask for the verify system. That's that file that we showed. Pull it back up here. That is this. It's going to the verify page that we created. It is sending the user information that you put into the Atavism client. It is sending the password, and then if these check out, it will return the user ID that then Atavism is able to use. If they use bad information, it will return an error. The code that it returns basically says what kind of an error it is. So in this case, it's an invalid password. Invalid username. And if we come into our fake user here, and we go back under our users, and we edit them, we change any of their stuff, and you just do your thing with them. You get set up so only certain people have access to it, what have you, and basically that's it. So in here, for example, we didn't set up these subscriptions because this is a free server, so I'm not going to run through all those. But in this case, if I, for example, delete that user, we can't log in with it. So only when they are on the website, validated, however you have your validation systems, which we're using the Ultimate Member, you can come through there and set it up. Do you want email verifications and all that sort of fun, gargly loop, however you want your safeties and such to work. And that will basically set up your remote authentication. And literally, that's it. The rest of it's set up the exact same as before. You'll still have to come in and edit the auth server.py. Of course, it helps if you actually run the nano to edit it. You're literally just going to take and set it up to run your stuff. Point it to the proper location. And that's it. You're done. You now have remote authentication enabled into your system. So we'll exit, save it. We will kill the servers. And then we fire the servers back up. And while that's doing its thing, no, I don't have the project open at the moment. Let's fire this up. This is going to load up our system to use the new remote authentication system and get that in place. And while that's doing its thing, I want to edit. Not that one. My PHP. That was where I was working on somebody else's stuff earlier. I don't want their stuff saved in here. But I need to go into my server. And yeah, just jump in there from here. Alright, so you're doing your thing now. Don't mind as I'm kind of editing some screens and everything here, so let me just turn some of the stuff off. Yoink, yoink, yoink. Now if we run this, I need to start checking these things before I go pushing buttons. Did I set your server? I think I did before. Wrong one. That's this one. Yes. And so if I try to log in right now with a fake person, it'll pop up and tell you, let me just pull this out so it's a little bit bigger. It tells you I don't have access to log in. This account doesn't exist. It's not in my system anywhere. This one, nope, other one. That username just doesn't exist. Now if I try to log in with mine, it'll take me into the character creator. In this case, so it's not going to work because I don't have a character creator or anything running at the moment, and I haven't reset all my other stuff. But you can see this went through the login authenticator, validated me, and it tried to throw me into the game. It can't throw me into the game because it's not all the way set up at the moment, but yay. So what is the status over there? You are running, but we basically just gotta turn on all the ports and everything. I gotta redo some of the stuff with the server and get it ready for external connections, and I also have to put in the actual database and not the empty core that basically doesn't have any of the characters or anything else in there, because that would kind of not be very good. But so today we set up the Linux VPS on Ubuntu 22, and we set up a downgraded version of MySQL. If we come into the Atavism editor here and we try to log into our database, it says success. It's not going to complain down here about I can't find missing keys and all that stuff. This key file is about the SHA key, the security key for the encrypting of your data. That's something we'll set up more towards when we're actually ready to get connections in here. But we can connect to the database from here. It's not complaining because it's using a different coalition for the new versions, and yeah, we don't have to change anything inside of here to work with it. It's just ready to go. So I hope it was helpful for everybody and you got an idea of how to do your own VPSs. They're very, very easy, and I do apologize for all the long-winded videos, but I try to get as much information out there as I can on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Because again, I'm expecting you not to be here knowing what you're doing, or you wouldn't be trying to watch a tutorial on how to do it. So I do get kind of lengthy on my explanations and stuff for trying to reference what it is and how it works. I try to actually do it with you there. If I make a mistake, I'm not going to run through and do a video edit and cut out my mistakes. Hey, we all make mistakes, and I'm no perfect person either. I am not a Linux master, so I do kind of keep little cheat sheets around with all of the commands and all that sort of stuff. So here's basically my little cheat sheet for copying up the commands. I did forget to do the swap space, but we'll do that when I redo some of the other stuff, because by default this gives us like 2 gigs of swap. And now that we're actually running a server, you'll see our memory has dropped like a rock. We're down to 1 gig free. And you can see most of all that memory is going into Java, running basically our server for Atavism. MySQL's in there using some, but it's using nowhere near what everybody else is. So yeah, we're going to want to turn on our swap. You can see we're already using some of our swap. Right now it's none, but we don't have a lot to play with compared to what we're actually using on our memory here. So we are going to kind of work on this. We're using about 4 gig of RAM just for the server itself. That's pretty intense, and we have no connections at the moment. So once we actually start getting some connections, that memory is going to get gobbled up very fast. You will want cache. Usually you don't need that much cache, but my general rule of thumb is it should be at least what your memory is. So in this case, we have an 18 gig system. We should have at least an 18 gig swap. Generally, we'll never need that much, but I would rather have it there than not have enough memory and the system goes haywire, especially when we have to increase our connections. So we're going to next run actually set up the swap space. We're going to delete the HN Gamer user authentication system and reinstall it from scratch. And we're going to come through here and set up some of our securities and all that sort of stuff, add some extra users, change some of the permissions around and that sort of stuff, and actually get a connection into our game and get everything nice, happy going and ready to blow. So you can see we are running the remote authentication on our brand new server. We can't quite connect to the server just yet, but it's there, is just not usable because at the moment nothing actually exists here, so it's kind of being painful with it. But all we gotta do is basically go through and set up our server information on this and we will be good to go and ready to connect. Now in turn, I think that's pretty much everything we're gonna run through on this. So I'll end it here. I will try to do another video tomorrow. I am having some timing issues. I do apologize for the delays between the videos, but I'm doing some help with another developer over at Vision. And basically Vision is doing some upgrades on their stuff and I'm helping him out with it. And you can check out some of their stuff as well. Be sure to give them a little thing. This is theirs. They're at store.tinyzoo. You can follow some of the stuff that they're doing and whatnot. And they are making up a Christian-based MMO. So you can check out theirs. I'm helping them out with a few of their little things. I'm also helping, who else am I helping? I got so many people I'm working with right now. Let's see, Tigric, I'm working with his UMA stuff. Flatman, kind of doing an everything thing. Nyron's kind of just trying to learn the system as a whole from the core perspective. And Mr. Sorcerer, kind of just, he's learning from scratch. And geez, got all these messages of people that are asking for stuff and I haven't really responded to any of them for a while. And so I will go ahead and use some of the stuff here and get these things set up. Be sure to give a like, follow, subscribe, and don't have too much fun out there. Be safe and enjoy yourself.